Last week, my wife, Kim, told me that we had lost a library book that our son, Teddy, had checked out. After looking through the stacks of board books, paperbacks, and hard-covered stories on our boys' shelves, we determined that either A, the book is in an alternative universe, B, our dog Chloe has secretly devoured the book, C, we've legitimately lost the copy, or D, we turned in the story, but somehow the library checked it in improperly. Now, I kind of hope it's A, and not just because I'm intrigued by multiversal theories, but I'm honestly leaning towards answer D, that we turned in the book, but somehow it just did not get checked in properly with a couple dozen other books alongside it. In truth, we've paid heavier library fines even in this calendar year than we will in purchasing this particular book, so it's not a huge deal to ante up a little bit of cash to support our amazing city and library. However, there are times when I take for granted the things that have been loaned to me. Now, yes, I can go on the library's website and I can see which books or video games, audiobooks, board games, tablets, etc. that my family's checked out. But it's easy for me, in my mind, to slip into a place where I start to believe some more important things belong to me, which were never mine in the first place. Which sounds a little bit like what we just heard from Matthew in this disturbing gospel lesson. Now, it would be wild for me, in the case of this library book that we cannot find, Lego City, Work This Farm, that's the name of the book. It'd be crazy for me to take the lead from today's parable. It would be crazy for me to receive a notice from the Jefferson County Library Cooperative and to choose violence. It would be insane if, when told by the library worker I needed to return what was not mine, if I then reacted by killing that employee or setting ablaze the highly flammable tinder that is a stack of fantasy fiction. The logic outlined by Jesus in this parable and exemplified by the tenant farmers seems to allow for me to walk into the Homewood Library branch and threaten the kind workers at the circulation desk with murder if they ever asked me about an overdue item. Not just this, but I should take control of the whole branch as my own personal bookshop to be defended with aggression. All of this sounds so absurd exiting my mouth in a sermon. It's in the gospel, but is it good news? It sounds more like the content of a violent fantasy novel or a scene from The Godfather than good news. And yet here it is, in black and white, in Matthew's telling of Jesus' story. These words were proclaimed by Jesus to temple leaders who were quizzing him about his authority. And this encounter transpired during the last week of Jesus' earthly ministry in the lead up to the Passover celebration. Thus, this story occurred in an overwhelmingly intense setting. But what was Jesus truly saying here? The owner of a vineyard sent in his chosen workers, then his son, to collect the property owner's part of what tenant farmers in the land had produced. But the leaseholders bloodied and murdered those servants and his son. Why? To send the message that they were not going to give back what they had been given. This is not compassionate, it's not loving, nor is it sane. Who would do such a thing? Well, we would. We do it every single day, and not just when we forget which books are the libraries. Sure, we don't let others see this sort of behavior. We don't treat our friends or neighbors like this because of social pressure, social ridicule, or social media. But make no mistake, this story of the wicked tenants is not only about temple leaders of long ago, it's about us too. We have been given so much: time, talent, and treasure, gifts, abilities, and skills. This earth, this great country, and the church too. What do we do with all these things given to us? Well, often we hide them away with the blinds shut. As one of my favorite preachers, the Reverend Evan Garner, once said about this passage, we hoard the things that God has given us, pretend they were ours to begin with, and keep the fruits of our labors for ourselves. All of our skills, abilities, resources, and opportunities belong to God. Yet we begin almost every encounter by asking, what's in it for me? All of the love, affection, loyalty, and trust that we enjoy, well, they come from God. Yet we would rather hold on to them than give them away. Our greatest gift, the freedom to choose whom we will honor with our lives, is handed to us by God. And we choose to turn inward and seek self-satisfaction instead of devoting ourselves to our Creator and to each other. We start thinking all of this is ours. It's our church, our families, our lives. We put in some hard work. We really do. It's not easy working in the vineyard. The sun beats down, the ground hardens, the sweat pours, the weeds have thorns, the body aches. So the fruit that is born, we believe it's ours. We produced it. Even if those holy ones of every age cry out, reminding us that no one is an island and none of us made ourselves. We think we were left alone in this vineyard a long, long time ago. Even when prophets point towards the legitimate landowner, we get lured in by our own siren call to keep the wealth, to keep what is ours, to keep on earning. We believe it's all ours, if not in our minds, then with our actions. Despite this, God decided to do something wild. God became incarnate to be with us. Even observing in the first century and before this very human tendency to see the world around us as belonging to us, God chose to send his Son into this mess to be with us human beings. Yes, as absurd as this parable is, what is even crazier is that God would see the selfish tendencies, especially among religious folks, to hoard power and to attribute God's gifts as our own. God would view this and still become incarnate. Even knowing how absurd we are, God is still pleased to dwell with us. In the incarnation of God through Jesus of Nazareth, we discover this hard-to-understand truth. God yearns to be with us, even in our selfishness, even in our self-centeredness. And in doing this, God does not condone our lunacy, but nonetheless, God makes holy even the mundane in our lives. The secular becomes sacred. In Jesus' incarnation, we are reminded of the original incarnation, the creation. In creation, God made everything. In incarnation, God redeemed everything. And in the age of the Spirit from Pentecost onward to today, God is in the process of sanctifying, making everything holy. And yet we strive, sometimes intentionally, to forget all this, that God has given, has redeemed, and is sanctifying everything. When Jesus came, he pointed to what had always been true, that everything is God's. All of creation belongs to God. The whole vineyard is God's. All time and space too. Sure, we happen to be in stewardship season, but it is true always. Everything belongs to God. Time, talent, treasure, your life, your family, and your money. In some churches, well, they like to talk about tithing, and that's nice and all, but that ain't it. God doesn't want 10% of everything. God wants everything, 100% of it. This is scary, right? To give everything away to God. One of my favorite bands, Spoon, released a song earlier this year entitled, "I Can't Give Everything Away." And I keep thinking about that song. Yeah, we become creatures of comfort and convenience. In the glossy sheen of social media posts, we see the lifestyle of others beaming up. We see the ads for the next thing to make life easier or better. And we strive to keep up with the Joneses. Underpinning this pursuit of besting one's neighbors is the belief that right now, right here, we are not enough. We buy into scarcity, that there won't be enough, that we aren't enough, and that something, someone, or some position will somehow make us enough. But this ain't it. St. Augustine wrote the following way back around the year 400, but it still rings true. "You have made us for yourself, O Lord, and our heart is restless until it rests in you. Now you might be wondering, okay, Seth, this sounds nice and all. I want to be able to rest in God, but how? Let me give you 3 ways. First, recognize that the vineyard isn't yours. It's not ours. The vineyard of our life, our family, our church, our world, we are caretakers of them all, stewards of the gifts given to us. But everything belongs to our Creator. Next, see the world not through the lens of scarcity displayed in our overly consumeristic culture, but through the lens of God's abundance. That preacher I was talking about earlier said it this way: we have everything we need to make this world the way that God dreams it could be. The wealth, the opportunity, and the freedom. But we've been borrowing all those things for so long that we've forgotten that they don't belong to us, and they never did. What we have been given is not ours, and it certainly will not be ours when we are called home. So we can start practicing the art of giving things away in this moment. What I am saying may make you feel uncomfortable or even mad, but if you've been viewing stewardship as a fundraising tactic that we use to keep the lights on here at church, then I'm sorry, us collared folks, have not been clear enough. Which brings me to my final point about how our hearts will rest in God. Stewardship is a spiritual practice meant to remind us of the ultimate truth. Everything is God's, and you and I, we are not God. We begin in God. We end in God. But this middle bit, this is up to us. Are we going to pretend that this vineyard is ours, or are we going to give back the produce that belongs to the one who created it all? There's this absurd cartoon that I want to end with, and it helps to make the point that we have a choice in how we respond to God coming into our lives. It's a bit funny, if a bit of a gut punch, maybe like this whole sermon. An alien has landed on Earth and is talking with an earthling about Jesus. The alien says, "Oh, Jesus comes back every 2 or 3 weeks. We gave him this big box of chocolate when he first arrived. Why? What did you guys do?" To which the earthling replied, "It's all God's. Are we going to respond to this truth with murder, or are we going to respond to this truth with chocolate?"